Ex-cons of Reddit. Which crimes were respected in prison? Which were hated? Why? Attorney here with several prison guard friends in the Northeast USA. Substantially violent crimes will get you respect, as in people will leave you alone. Smart guy crimes, if you ran a good scam or were a major drug player, are also respected, as in people may want to be your friend. If you're in for lesser drug or miscellaneous larceny, gun possession, simple assault type crimes, you're a nobody. Kid D'ers are separated out here because they are absolutely targets, and Rs are often targeted as well. As another commenter mentioned, if you have crimes against women and children, you're gonna have a bad time. I haven't ever personally been in jail, but I speak on behalf of my parents who have both been in and out. While no crimes were necessarily respected by all, crimes such as stealing or making counterfeit money were seen by fellow inmates as more impressive, and these people would have an easier time getting along with others. Pedophiles, Rs, CP viewers, etc., these people were despised, so much so that they have their own section of the jail dedicated to them. If a pedophile was put in general population with the rest of the inmates, he'd likely have a knife pulled on him or worse. While inmates all commit crimes, most are still able to look down on the despicable types of human beings that prey on children. A friend of mine got away with 3 robberies, but what put him in jail was an assault to a police officer, and he said jail was easy. He also pointed out that most of the convicts would do research in the prison libraries if they didn't believe you or wanted to confirm your sentence, and if you came up lying about what you were in for, you were effed or dead, were his words. Not an ex-con, but related to several. Here's a list of people that are usually killed on sight. Snitches, Rs, a lot of the time, pedophiles, and murderers of women and children. I'm probably missing a few. Here's a list of criminals that aren't necessarily respected, but preferred by prisoners. Murderer of rival gang members, drug traffickers, dealers, and people on drug possession charges. The way they find your charges is that you are put in with paperwork, and this paperwork has a list of what you're in for. Your respective race's gang will have people go and ask to see your papers, and afterwards you'll be judged by them. Some prisons might be different from country to country. S crimes are the lowest of the low, priority given to those who commit them against children. For S offenders, it's PC or having to live in constant fear of violence. Respected crimes are not centered around one thing. It depends on the person. It's not like with the other way around where everyone hates S offenders. Even the COs will sometimes tip guys off that they should check somebody's paperwork. Please like and subscribe if you've made it this far. I hope you'll enjoy the rest of the video and have a wonderful day. ITT. People who have never been down spewing the same old 70-year-old myths and stereotypes they learned by watching TV and movies. There should be a first-hand experience tag to sort through all the echo chamber drivel, like the serious tag helps sort through all the bad puns. Just saying, it gets old seeing the same old reposts and same old replies from people who have no actual experience to base their insights on. Anyway, to answer the question, and yes, I've done time in jail and prison. In prison, it doesn't really matter what you're in for as long as you don't have kids on your charges and you don't cooperate with authorities and snitch on others. You'll have your papers checked, so don't lie about your charges and let them know in intake if you are a snitch or como so you have no chance of being in Gen Pop. If you get sent to Gen Pop and if you refuse to show your papers, emails are sent out by inmates asking for help investigating your case and charges. Most shot callers have phones and can instantly find out themselves what you did without having to rely on coded emails. Back in the day before phone smuggling corrupted a majority of COs, you had to send out phone calls or emails asking your people to check on someone. You gotta show your papers to be able to eat with and associate with your people in prison. Your people typically being those of the same race or gang affiliation. You don't have or won't show your papers, you'll be a lone outcast target of every group looking for someone to exploit or even use as an easy victim that could earn them and their people points if you send them to medical or the morgue. The bottom line is this: you have no friends in prison. If you do, you have no idea how to play the game and survive. Even if you're doing time for killing someone who broke into your home and arred your wife, nobody really cares or discusses the crimes of fellow inmates once you've settled in. You either have kids on your charges or you don't, and if you do, you better make sure you don't end up in a unit with those who don't. I've seen comos assaulted viciously, and the guards took their sweet time getting there. I've seen COs put comos in General Pop just to see them get effed up, perhaps because the como was an a-hole in intake, Or perhaps some CO just want to get as many comos hurt or killed as they can. But once you're vetted, your experience in prison will be dependent on your communication skills, your patience and tolerance, and knowing how to avoid powder keg situations. Comos child killers are number one in everyone's list. The guards, the guys, every single person. Guards react slower to the incident when they know. Aside from specific gang-related praises like Serenos respecting their fellows for Norteño killings, the only respected crime is when someone handles number one. Even though I wouldn't consider that truly respected, you could still get into crap. The only real respect you get is from the crimes you commit while you're in there. I asked a friend who has been to jail since I have no experience. Aside from child molesters who are universally despised, you're not respected for your crime, you're respected for how you conduct yourself. If you stay out of drama and respect others, you'll get the same in return. Just be prepared to stand your ground. The only hated offenders are child molesters, child murderers, abusers, Rs, S offenders, snitches. It really depends on the state and institution. Like in my state, elderly abusers, abusers of handicapped, mentally retarded, anyone who's deemed as vulnerable and defenseless is also a huge no-no. Worked in a jail. From my experience being in close quarters with criminals and alleged criminals, the obvious crimes were severely hated, like R, S assault, CP, beating women or kids. People in cases like this were all put in a separate pod. No crimes were really respected, but one guy I knew for shooting his cheating wife and the guy she was cheating with was respected for that, though. But I believe it was only because of the way he really owned it and joked so often about it. For whatever reason, they really liked this guy, and to be honest, even I found it hard to hate him for it. Dude was the nicest guy I ever met. I've done time in county and state. S crimes are the worst crimes you can have. If you have an S crime, you basically have a green light on you. Even in protective custody, S offenders and snitches get stabbed and beat up. Also, any crimes involving children are the worst. Child endangerment charges will get you killed, obviously S crimes that involve a child. Violence towards a child will also get you a green light in the yard. The crimes that command the most respect among inmates are bank robbery, murder, racketeering. A lot of hustlers that got caught with weight are also respected. I have a friend who constantly is going to jail for really basic things like graffiti, but he always seems to have a pretty okay time. He just doodles with whatever he can find, and when people get curious, he draws whatever officers and fellow cellmates ask him to. Lots of people wanting self-portraits, but he always seems to make friends. Here, terrorism. The guy who went around town and stabbed few and one of his fellow Muslims was sadly not beaten to death in prison. He was then moved to some other place there where he is not allowed to see other inmates. In my opinion, a person like that should be put in with the rest and let the prisoners redeem themselves a little from the crimes they have committed. In Australia, generally speaking, murderers were given respect, though the crime itself might not be respected. Drug crimes were pretty middle of the way. The crime itself was respected even if the criminal wasn't. If you were a kid toucher, you went into protection prison because if you were in mainstream, people would jump on your head. The Australian term for being a snitch was called being a dog, which would get people jumping on your head just as fast as being a kid toucher, which earned the protection prisons the term boneyard, where all the dogs are. Brit here. From my experience, a lot of fraud, etc. is fine providing the victims are big corporations and or the government. Kind of a respectable crime. Drugs, affray, shoplifting, etc. are the main ones and perfectly fine. Obviously, S crimes and pedophiles are on the lowest rung. Burglary and mugging, etc. are not respected, or weren't where I was. Anything invading someone's personal home or similar were considered pretty crappy behavior, especially if your victim was a little old lady. Murder depended entirely on the reason. Lady who killed her abusive ex pretty much ran the wing. Lady who murdered her cousin because they burnt the sausages at a barbecue, not so much respect, but fear. The two women on my wing who had the most respect was one who was in for assaulting a police officer, her story suggested self-defense, and a woman who, along with 3 of her friends, beat the crap out of her daughter's abusive partner. Been to jail and prison a few times. Most of this is accurate with some slight tweaks. Most respected are violent crimes, but not mass shooting white boys or any of that crap. King of the latter are the boys who committed violent crimes against authority, i.e. cops and bulls. Shot callers, folks who ran crap on the outside, normally run crap on the inside too, or earn some decent level of respect. It depends on location though, as evidenced by John Gotti. Dude still has to pay the brand for protection because he wasn't crap when he got locked up. Least respected are essentially the untouchables or unclean. In the States, it's normally diaper snipers, more commonly called comos in the Bing in the US. Oftentimes, they can't even buy protection and will have to stand in the middle of the yard in a designated space where their back is constantly to virtually half the yard. Really not a place you ever want to be. Outside the US, it isn't as hard line, though. Comos still catch shivs, but in the Russian-run prisons, for example, where the lowest class are the goats and roosters, there are actual acceptable forms of R. R's that won't knock you down in class and aren't viewed as R by inmates. General good policy is not to F kids, whether expecting to go to the Bing or not. Once inside, though, best to know your surroundings and be a quick learner as the hierarchy, the courts, etc. are different everywhere. And most people don't learn to make body armor out of magazines and knives out of cigarette filters on the outside. I've never been to prison, but I have spent a considerable amount of time around people in my past who have, and I have asked them the same questions, so I'll share what I was told. Basically, the crimes they hate are the obvious that everyone knows about. S crimes, crimes against children, and especially S crimes against children. From what they told me, if you have any of those on your record, then inmates are literally required by their higher-ups of that car to attack you on sight and do their best to kill you. And if they don't, at least beat you up. Then they will send someone to do it to them for disobeying. The general theme they operate by is, if I tell you to do something, say yes and do it, or it will be done to you. Also, it's not a crime, but as everyone knows, snitching will get you into a world of trouble with the inmates, and your best choice at that point is to roll it up and hope to God the guards never put you in GP again. As far as crimes that are respected are concerned, there really aren't any. The only thing that comes close is if you killed someone in defense of your family or loved ones. And they love bank robbers, not because they respect the crime, but because they find the stories absolutely fascinating and entertaining. These things were told to me by people who did considerable time in the California state prison system, and things may vary in different parts of the country, though I doubt it's any different anywhere in regards to S crimes against children. I think that's pretty consistently a crime they hate across the whole country. Please leave your story in the comments. I would love to make a video on them in the future. Also, don't forget to like and subscribe.